Welcome in, guys, to the Dylan Lieck podcast. My first episode, and I'm going to be breaking down the Dallas Cowboys today, so let's jump right in. The Cowboys come into the season with a projected win total of 10 games that opened at 9.5. Professional bettors took it up to 10. A lot of pro bettors going over that 9.5 win total after the Cowboys were coming off back-to-back 12-win seasons and returned pretty much most of their roster intact with the exception of a few guys. They're the second favorites, though, just to win their division at plus 195. The Eagles sitting atop the division at minus 115, plus 500 to win the NFC, and plus 1,100 to be crowned Super Bowl champs. And the question is, as it always is with Dallas Cowboy fans, are we in for another disappointing season? We will look in depth at the offense and the defensive side of the ball. So we'll start first with the offense, where Mike McCarthy is leading the reins once again. Offensive coordinator Kellen Moore gone to the LA Chargers, and thank God. Kellen Moore drives me absolutely nuts. He's been a guy who came in and really brought some youth and some cool ideas and schematics to the offense. But as the years go on, you just see a lot of inability to adjust, play calling that just is really, really poor in situational spots. And so I'm thrilled that Kellen Moore is gone. I'm not absolutely thrilled that we brought in Schottenheimer. I would have been a little more excited to see a younger guy, more progressive guy who runs an offense, maybe a collegiate coach. But I do understand that's kind of the direction they went with Kellen Moore. So I get going kind of in an opposite direction here with an older OC. They're calling it the Texas Coast offense. That's what McCarthy and Schottenheimer are kind of calling their new offense. It is merging their system with Kellen Moore's offense. And the idea really is to help Dak and the offense not go through this massive systematic change, right? You normally bring in a new OC and you have a new system, and it can be really difficult for a quarterback and an offense to quickly get on the same page with the new OC. Doesn't seem to be the case here. According to Schottenheimer, he said in an interview, basically it's going to be about 70% of Kellen Moore's system, but 30% of McCarthy and Schottenheimer's systems mixed in. And I like that. The good thing is I actually think schematically Kellen Moore's offense was pretty good. It was more situational things and his play calling that really was the issue. So I kind of like this. The idea is to kind of make the offense a little simpler, which I like. It's to play more to player strengths and matchups, which is another good thing that I'm hearing. And also like that Dak doesn't have to learn a completely new offense because, let's face it, I don't think that would be a great idea for the Cowboys to have Dak coming into a season with a brand new offense. Now, moving on, let's go ahead and look at some personnel. And we'll start with some key additions. Obviously, the Cowboys lost Ezekiel Elliott, although I wouldn't really count that as a key departure. Obviously, Zeke, true Cowboy, I love him, but he was on the decline, and he's probably got a year or two left in the NFL. Key additions, bringing in Brandon Cooks, who I'm going to talk about in a little bit. And I think that's a really good pickup. Some people not really looking at Cooks as a solid number two, but I like Brandon Cooks, and I think he's a great addition to this wide receiver core. And then obviously we drafted a couple players on the offensive end, including Luke Schoonmaker, tied in out of Michigan. And so we'll start with the quarterback here. And Prescott in 2022 threw for 2,860 yards, 23 touchdowns, 15 picks, 7.3 yards per attempt. He had a 91.1 passer rating and a 59.9 QBR. And also those numbers are a little skewed because Dak missed 4 or 5 games in the middle of the season after getting injured in game 1 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year. But when you look at it, obviously the thing that everybody likes to talk about from last year is the interceptions. And yes, 15 is really high. And it's more concerning that it was in just a 12-game span. So that number needs to drop. But on the surface, it looks a lot worse than it actually is. When you dig into the numbers, Dak threw 18 turnover-worthy passes last year. 15 of those were intercepted. 15. That means 83% of his passes that were interceptable by defenses were intercepted. I mean, that's extremely high compared to the rest of the league. For comparison, Josh Allen, 29 turnover-worthy throws last year, 14 of them picked off, 48.3%. Right? Allen's considered a top-tier quarterback. And if you average it out, he had more turnover-worthy throws per game than Dak did. You look at another guy, I would consider a below-average quarterback, but just for reference in terms of the amount of interceptable or turnover-worthy throws that are intercepted, Geno Smith, 29 turnover-worthy throws as well, 9 picks for him. So that's just over 30% of his balls that were turnover-worthy got intercepted. So yes, is 15 high in 12 games? Absolutely. He needs to cut down on them. Some of them were not good, right? Some of these are just absolute head-scratchers, and you're just like, why? I can think specifically in the playoff game against San Francisco, right? Like some of these are just really, really bad decisions by Dak. But that said, you have to assume this is going to regress, right? He's not going to have 83% of his passes that are turnover worthy be intercepted this year, right? If he goes through 16 games and has 19, 20 turnover worthy passes, I can absolutely live with that. As I said, Josh Allen, 29 turnover worthy throws, right? In a full season. So, Dak needs to cut down on the interceptions, but he's still had quite a bit of bad luck last year, and I think that's going to even out a little bit this year, which is why you see his interception total at right around 11. Overall, though, it does feel like Dak is missing something, right? Is he a guy who's going to just put you on his back and carry you to a Super Bowl? No. It feels always like he's right on the cusp of being this elite top, 7-level quarterback. And every time you think he's about to take that next step to do that, he just takes a step or two backwards. And it's really frustrating for me as a Cowboys fan. I'm sure for all Cowboys fans over the past couple of years. But, there's just not – he's just not at that elite level. And I just don't know that he'll ever be there. Does that mean Dallas can't win a Super Bowl with him? No. But it just means we have to decide what we really want to put on Dak's plate. The other key component that I think goes – kind of untalked about is Dak's legs. When you look at Dak's most effective seasons, he really utilized his legs more. Obviously, in his rookie year, he utilized them a ton. Early in his career, before the injury, we know Dak ran more. And I would love to see more quarterback runs out of this offense. I understand durability can be a question, but Dak is athletic. He's big. He's strong. If he can protect himself in the open field when running, I really think you're going to catch defenses off guard this year. And if your goal is to win a Super Bowl, I don't know how you don't just utilize all your players' strengths. And to me, that is one of Dak's strengths. He is mobile. He is athletic, right? Let him get out and run. We've got to do that more if we want to have a more effective offense this year. Obviously, points per game, we're always up there in the top of the league. But Dak, in key situations, tends to just want to sit in the pocket or even if he rolls out, he's looking downfield. And I understand that. It's the NFL. You don't want to be running every possession, every play, but Dak needs to use his legs more. And I really hope we do that this year. I think that could be a thing that defenses won't scheme for because he just doesn't do it anymore. And if he is able to use his legs and Schottenheimer and McCarthy are able to get him to start running a little bit more, I think that could be a really key part of the offense. I mean, you're still not going to convince me, and this could be a hot take, but I just don't see Jalen Hurts as a better quarterback than Dak Prescott. And the difference is Jalen Hurts' legs, right? The Eagles were a quarter away from winning a Super Bowl last season with a guy who I really think is a average, maybe at best, passer. Obviously, his offensive line is outstanding and he has tons of time to throw. But there's no reason that this Cowboys team can't get to a Super Bowl with Dak at the command. But he's got to cut down on the turnovers, and I think he's got to utilize his legs if we want to get there. Looking at the running back positions, I think this is one of the stronger position groups on the team. Obviously, as much as I love Zeke, it's absolutely the right move to let him go. It was just clear last year that Zeke was on his last leg. He graded out 25th among 31 qualifying running backs last season. He averaged under 4 yards a carry for the first time in his career. He had just 876 yards on 231 carries. He did score 12 touchdowns, but again, that's large part due to the fact that he got a high percentage of the goal line carries, and because the Cowboys have this baffling inability to complete a successful quarterback sneak, which has become the easiest play in the NFL. You just line up there and push the quarterback in. I don't understand why it's so difficult for the Cowboys to run a quarterback sneak, but it's been a problem. Hopefully that's a Kellen Moore thing, and we're able to do it this year. But Zeke got a lot of his touchdowns because the Cowboys were running the ball inside the 1 yard line, unable to quarterback sneak. You look at Tony Pollard. I've been begging for him to get more carries over the past couple years. He was underutilized last year. He was underutilized in the playoffs. 5.2 yards per carry last year, ran for over 1,000 yards, 150 more yards than Zeke on about 40 less carries. In the 2 games Zeke missed, he ran for 115 plus in both games, a total of 4 rushing touchdowns, almost 7 yards a carry. I mean, he was absolutely elite. Obviously, when you are the feature back and you get more carries, you wonder if Pollard can carry the workload, and that seems to be what people like to talk about. But, I know it's a small sample size, but like I said, he carried the ball, I believe it was 14 and 22 times. It was 36 times in those 2 games, and he was fantastic, right? He was elite, and not to mention the fact that he's a significantly better pass catcher out of the backfield. We have got to find a way to get the ball in Tony Pollard's hands. He needs to touch the ball 20 to 25 times a game minimum. This guy's explosive. He's gotten a lot stronger and bigger since he's been in the league, which is another reason I think that he can carry the load as a lead back. I'm excited to see him as the lead back here. After him, obviously the Cowboys did pick up Ronald Jones, but I love the kid out of Kansas State, Deuce Vaughn. This was my absolute favorite player the Cowboys drafted this year. I think he's going to be an excellent change of pace back for the Cowboys, play on some third down situations. He's a pretty good pass catcher. I think you might be able to even line him up as receiver in some instances. He was incredible in college at Kansas State. He just runs like a bowling ball. He bounces off defenders. He's strong. He's tough. He runs super hard. And he's just electric to watch. Like every game I'm watching the preseason, I'm watching this kid. It's like exciting. I'm like on the edge of my seat, like excited to see what happens because he's just so fun to watch. He ran for 2 touchdowns in the preseason, around 5 yards a carry. I know it's preseason and you're not against great defenses or first team defenses, but I think he's going to play a bigger role than people think this year. He's a fan favorite. Little guy, kind of reminds me a little bit of a mix between Austin Eckler and Darren Sproles. I think this guy is eventually going to be a lead back in the NFL. I really do. I'm super high on Deuce Vaughn. I'm so glad we got him. I hope we utilize him in something beyond just special teams this year. Moving on to the wide receiving core, and I actually am really high on the wide receiving core as well. CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver 1, he's proved to be a top wide receiver in this league. He proved it last year with the departure of Amari Cooper. He was tied for 5th in catches in the NFL with 107. He was 6th in the NFL in yards with 1,359, 9 touchdowns, a little over 12 and a half yards per catch. He was 6th in the NFL in yards per route run, 4th in EPA among all wide receivers. He was elite last year, guys. He really, really was. He blossomed into a true number 1 guy, and he's one of the best receivers in the NFL. I think that's not a wild thing to say. I think CeeDee Lamb is an outstanding wide receiver, and he did it while defenses were keying in on him, right? Every single week, he was the number 1 guy defenses were keying in on. Not to mention, he only had Dak for 12 games, right? Dak missed 5 games. And CeeDee still went for almost 1,400 yards, 9 touchdowns, 170 catches. What's he going to do with Dak for the whole year? Not to mention the fact that we add Brandon Cooks. Also, CeeDee Lamb is in a contract year this year, which is why I really like him. He's playing for a massive deal, right? I expect him to be fantastic. I could see this being his best season of his career. I know he had an outstanding year last year, but I wouldn't be shocked to see a 1,500, 1,600 yard year with double-digit touchdowns and over 100 catches again. Looking at wide receiver number 2, obviously the Cowboys brought in Brandon Cooks from the Houston Texans. Cooks is coming off a season where he underwhelmed statistically. Obviously, he's been in the league for a while. He's getting a little up there in age, but he is still a really good number 2 option for any team. And I really don't understand why people have just forgotten about this guy. He's still a speed threat. 6 times in his career, he's had over 1,000 yards receiving. He only played in 13 games last year. So again, that kind of accounts for a little bit of the skewed numbers. 2 years ago, with no quarterback, he still had 90 catches for 1,037 yards and 6 touchdowns. So, he's not tapering off. He didn't play a lot last season. The Texans were the most pathetic offense known to man last year. So I think Cooks is going to surprise some people this year. He's going to be a good number 2. And the key as well is that this allows Michael Gallup to move back to the third option. Gallup, if he can get back to that 2019, 2020 season where those 2 seasons where he was really, really good. Last year, just 39 receptions, 434 yards and 4 touchdowns. And he struggled, if we're being honest, right? He was coming off a major injury. He didn't look like the guy we saw in the 2019 or 2020 seasons, but he's got 2 things working for him, right? Number one, he's another year removed from that injury. So physically, you have to expect he's going to be a little bit better this year, right? So that's working for him. I think he's going to be physically more healthy this year. And secondly, like I said, he had to play that number 2 wide receiver spot last year, which drew more attention, right? In his best years, he was basically the third option. And with the addition of Brandon Cooks, he's back to number 3. I think that's a real positive for him. I think you're going to have him see him have a resurgence this year. Hopefully, he's going to be a good third option for Dak. But let's see what happens with him. If he has a year anywhere near 2019-20 and Cooks and Lamb turn out to be what I think they will be, this could be one of the best receiving cores in the league. Looking at the other guys outside of the top 3, Jalen Tolbert in his second year out of South Alabama didn't really do anything as a rookie, but he has been absolutely raved about in camp. Word out of the Cowboys camp is he's improved. He's flashed a lot in the preseason. He had some really acrobatic, impressive catches. I think he's a dark horse because people really think he's got a lot of potential to be a good NFL wide receiver. Hopefully he continues to develop and just adds another weapon for Dak, but I like him. And then you got the kid, Kevontae Turpin, right? He is electric, right? He made the Pro Bowl as a rookie, as a punt returner and kick returner because of his speed and explosiveness, right? Similarly to Tolbert, we're at a Cowboys camp, he's flashed in the offseason, right? He's going to contribute in the receiving game this year. And if you're the Cowboys, look, you got to get this guy in the offense in some way, shape, or form, right? He's too explosive to not use him in certain packages. And that's another problem I have with fucking Kellen Moore, man. Like, why did this guy who's so explosive in the punt return game, so explosive with his speed and athleticism, why did he not get some touches on offense? I mean, it was very limiting. And I'm hoping Schottenheimer and McCarthy see that. It seems like the plan is to use him more in the receiving game this year, but he's just too explosive to leave out of the offense in a day and age when speed just kills, right? Moving on to the tight ends, huge loss with Dalton Schultz on the surface, right? Schultz was a solid tight end, close to Pro Bowl level the last couple seasons. So it's definitely a loss. It's going to be more by committee this year. We've got Jake Ferguson, Peyton Hendershot back, and Luke Schoonmaker, who we drafted. And I really think that although Dalton Schultz is gone, and he's by far the best tight end if you include him in the group with the other 3 guys, I also think that the Cowboys offense just really values tight ends and utilizes them whoever they are, right? It just seems that the Cowboys tight ends are always finding a way to have good seasons. Now, I'm not saying I would own any Cowboys wide receivers in fantasy football this year. I'm sorry, Cowboys tight ends in fantasy football this year. But I do think as a whole, they're going to be able to replace most of Schultz's production. Jake Ferguson is a solid tight end. He's an elite blocker, really is. Less of a pass catcher, but I think he could end up having a breakout year because you don't have to be an elite pass catcher in the offense the Cowboys run. And like we said, 70% of the offense schematically is going to stay the same. Hendershot is solid as well. And I think a Schoonmaker could definitely be a piece for the Cowboys to use as well, but it's going to be more by committee at tight end. So I think they'll be okay there despite losing Schultz. That's one of the bigger losses on the team. And I think it comes at a good position. Looking at the offensive lines, we've got pretty much the same unit as we've had in the last couple of years. But the key thing is that the Cowboys are healthy on the offensive line, at least going into the year, right? Last year, the Cowboys were 17th in adjusted line yards, 14th in pass blocking grade, and graded out 11th in run blocking, according to Pro Football Focus. So they were slightly above average last season. I think the eye test says that they were a little bit better than that. I would have put them right around the 10th, 11th spot overall. I think they were one of the better offensive lines in the league, but they weren't elite. Part of that was injuries, right? Tyron Smith tore his ACL before the season even started, right? Terrence Steele tore his ACL last season. So 2 starters out. That was huge. Looking at it from a personnel perspective, right? Left tackle will be Tyron Smith. As I stated, he tore his ACL before the season started last year and didn't return until week 15. When he did come back, Tyler Smith had really kind of come on, and they didn't want to move Tyler, so they moved Tyron to right tackle. He's back at left tackle this year, and I think that will be really good for him. That's his natural position, so that's a positive. Tyler Smith moves then to left guard. The second-year offensive lineman was outstanding in his first season. He's got a super high ceiling. He had some inconsistencies throughout the early time of the year, but he got much better as the year went on, and he was really, really good in the last 4 games of the season. I'm excited about him. At right tackle, we've got Terrence Steele, obviously tore his ACL and MCL last season. Luckily, he looks like he's going to be ready to go for the season opener, and that's huge for the Cowboys. He was undrafted in 2020, right? Undrafted has become a stud NFL offensive lineman, just earned himself an $86 million contract. That's outstanding. Love to see it when those undrafted guys end up becoming really good players. Obviously, don't have to mention much about Zach Martin, the all-world lineman, who is the measure of consistency in this league. Zach Martin is my favorite fucking player. Absolutely just a stud. The weakness comes at the center position, and that's Tyler Biadasz. And I may have butchered that pronunciation of his name, but he is the weak spot on this offensive line. He's just not lived up to expectations. I know he wasn't a first rounder. He was a 4th rounder out of Wisconsin, so it's not like he was expected to be this elite guy, but he just hasn't really improved much over the course of his career, right? And I think, unfortunately, that's the difference between an elite line and a really, really good line. If he is able to take some strides forward, which is a stretch, right? This could be maybe the best offensive line in the league, or at least top 3 or 4. Without him there, I still think they're a top 10 offensive line. I think they have a chance to be top 5 if they really, really perform well this year. But Biadasz is just the weak spot on this offensive line, so we'll keep an eye on him this year. But overall, the offensive line, super solid. Going to hopefully give Dak time back there and improve our running game this year with Pollard running most of the carries. But overall, this Cowboys offense has a chance to be elite, right? And it all kind of comes down to 2 things. I think one is, can the offensive line stay healthy, right? Depth is a huge question here. I think the Cowboys, as any team in the NFL experiences, are going to have injuries this year. We can't have the major ACL, MCL tears that we had the last couple seasons with our O linemen. We can't have, like Travis Frederick retiring early. These guys who we lose for full seasons or their career. If that happens, then this team is going to likely not compete for a Super Bowl. If that offensive line stays healthy, then it comes down to one thing. Can Dak do enough, right? Can Dak accept his role as not having to be this guy who just carries a team? I'm not saying he has to be a game manager, but it's okay to take some incompletions. It's okay to take some sacks, as bad as they are. You do not want to turn the ball over. That's what cost us in the playoff game. It's what cost Dak a lot of the time. Obviously, we talked about the turnover-worthy throws. He had some unlucky bounces go against him last year, but he's got to take care of the ball. He's got to do it if the Cowboys want to be a really, really good team this year. And if they can do that, this Cowboys team with this offense, talent-wise, has a chance to be the best they've been, in my lifetime, since back when the Cowboys had Aikman and Irving and Smith. So really excited to see what happens with this. Really hope we can stay healthy, because I think the sky is the limit for this offense. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, I'm not going to spend as much time on the defense just because I think the defense is better, and I think that's pretty clear to most people. But we'll take a look at the coaching staff and the personnel here. Last year, in fact, the last 2 seasons, the Cowboys have led the league in turnovers forced. 67 turnovers forced in that span under, of course, returning defensive coordinator Dan Quinn. Comes back for his third year to the Cowboys. Absolute steal by Dallas, getting to keep him another year. I didn't think we were going to keep him after year 1 because he did such a good job turning that defense around. Us Cowboys fans know how bad our defense had been in years past and the inconsistencies, and Quinn is the model of consistency. It's kind of clear that teams don't really see Dan Quinn as a head coach, at least not yet. Again, he did a really good job for a while in Atlanta, but it kind of all came crashing down. He's an elite defensive coordinator, but just an average head coach, right? And hopefully we can keep him as long as possible because he's just been outstanding as a defensive coordinator. Quinn lives in the nickel, right? He rushes 4. He does dial up some pressures, slightly above league average on pressure rate last season. But back-to-back seasons, the Cowboys have finished top 3 in schedule-adjusted defensive efficiency. Outstanding, right? Pressure-wise, elite, literally historic, right? Led the league with a 43% pressure rate, highest pressure rate in the NFL since the 2015 Denver Broncos. That is absurd. 693 pressures in the past 2 seasons. And that's why they force so many turnovers, right? You pressure the quarterback, you get in the backfield, you're going to cause mistakes by the offense. And that's why we've had 67 takeaways in 2 seasons. You'd think with that historic rate that the pressure rate has to drop a little bit, right? But it's not going to be a lot because they are really bringing back almost everybody. Not to mention they project to face a really bad schedule of offensive lines, right? So you look at key additions. Obviously, we got Stephon Gilmore. Gilmore is going to really improve the coverage on the back end. Obviously he's getting up there a little bit in age, but he's still really, really good. He is a huge upgrade. It was a weakness as well for the Cowboys, right? They needed a really good cover guy. Is he the guy who's going to just be like a Darrelle Revis in his prime and lock down every receiver he covers? No, but we got him for a 5th round pick. A fucking 5th round pick. That is nuts. I understand the agents wanted to get him off their book, but I don't understand how the fuck you let that guy go. He's played 1,500 snaps in the past 2 seasons with the Panthers and the Colts, and it looked really, really good. It looked like he did before his major injury. Last year, cornerbacks with at least 500 snaps, he graded out 6th in coverage, 6th of all corners at that age, right? So yes, age-wise, is he going to be a guy who we're going to have for 4 seasons and be elite? No, but in this single season, I think he's going to be really, really good. He is a top 10 corner in coverage for sure. On the other side, we obviously have Stephon Diggs. He got paid, and the Cowboys committed to him long-term. And we really saw Diggs improve last season, right? I know the interceptions dipped, and that was going to happen. Nobody is going to maintain that level of turnovers forced. He's just got a knack for the ball. He still is going to make plays in the turnover game, but in terms of coverage, he was much better last year. He played more snaps in 2022 than in 2021, and he allowed 32% less receiving yards on coverage. When he did get beat, it wasn't as bad. Us Cowboys fans can remember even in the years when he was having really good seasons with all the interceptions. When he got beat, it would be bad. It would be really bad. He's gotten better. I credit that to Dan Quinn and the coaching staff, right? He's improving. And if he continues to take another leap this year in coverage, the Cowboys could have an elite set of corners. Their secondary there is really solid. Deron Bland is going to be the starter in the slot. He's solid. I like him. Glad he's back. Jordan Lewis has been battling some injuries. He's flashed in his first couple of years. If he can stay healthy, he's a really good piece for the Cowboys to have as well. I like that. The Cowboys traded away Kelvin Joseph for Noah Igbenogany. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Not sure that's a huge upgrade. I think it's kind of just an equal trade, but I think he might fit Dan Quinn's system. And to be honest, Kelvin Joseph has really kind of bothered me the past couple years. He's always good for a dumb penalty. He's physical, but he's just not been that great. So I don't hate that we got rid of him. Safety position, probably the least talented group on the entire roster. Malik Hooker was good last year. Donovan Wilson, I'm actually kind of higher on than some people. He's really good against the run. But there's just not a lot of holes in the secondary. I think they're going to be solid. When you look at the linebackers, obviously Van Der Esch had one of his best seasons last year since his rookie year. Really, really liked him when he came in that first year. Obviously, it didn't look as great for a couple years, but he's kind of had a resurgence of his career with Dan Quinn. So hopefully he continues to take that next step forward or at least be as good as last year. I like him a lot when he's playing well and healthy. Damon Clark, he was thrown into the fire as a rookie, right? He played almost 400 snaps, and he did so at replacement level. He's been good in camp so far. Unfortunately, DeMarvion Overshone tore his ACL in the preseason game against the Seattle Seahawks. That stinks because I thought he was going to provide some depth to the Cowboys linebacker room. So that's a little bit of a loss. But overall, the linebackers really good. Obviously, Parsons will play linebacker at times. But, they like to line them up in all different positions. Obviously, the defensive ends, really, really good. As mentioned before, pressure is something the Cowboys do extremely well. Micah Parsons is absolutely elite. 18% pressure rate on pass rush snaps. But the Cowboys have a lot of other dudes. DeMarcus Lawrence, is he as good as he was in his prime? No, but still above a 14% pressure rate last year on passing snaps. You've got Armstrong, Dante Fowler Jr., Sam Williams, all over 12% pressure rates. And they just cycle in bodies. That's the thing. I mean, you got basically these tired offensive lines playing entire games, and the Cowboys just continuously throw out their fresh bodies. And that's why they've been able to pressure the quarterback so well without having an overly high blitz rate, right? They're getting there a lot of the time naturally. And again, credit to Dan Quinn. But the DN position and the edge rushers are just really, really good. I love that position group, one of the better position groups on the team. And then you look at the middle, right? I think there was a lot of question from some Cowboys fans about drafting Maze Smith in the first round that early, but I can tell you that if he fell to Kansas City, he was getting taken. So he was going to be a first round pick either way. And it really just filled a void for the Cowboys, right? They needed a run stuffing defensive lineman, right? That was what they really struggled with, stopping the run last year, right? He's an absolute fucking mauler inside. This guy is a fucking beast, right? He upgrades a position of need. He's going to have an immediate role stopping the run, especially when they go to that 3 down front. And he's going to make life easier for that linebacking core because he's going to stuff the run up there, right? And let them come down and make tackles at or behind the line of scrimmage. And then you've got Osen Golston, right? He's been serviceable the last couple of years. Jonathan Hankins added late last year. He's not as good as he used to be. But word out of camp is he's been a standout, right? Maybe a resurgence there. So I love the defensive line overall. The defense, I think, is going to be one of the best in the league. I think it has a chance to be the best defense in the league. And I can't believe I'm saying that about a Dallas Cowboys defense, but Dan Quinn has made me a believer. So overall, the Cowboys just look like a very complete team. There's just not a lot of holes in the entire roster, offensively or defensively. The starting 22 is really, really good at some of the important positions, right? You've got a lot of depth, pass rushers, right? You got a really good receiving core with some good young talent coming up, right? The offensive line needs to stay healthy. That's going to be important. Dak needs to cut down on the turnovers. That's going to be important, right? But I think defensively, that's going to be our calling card this year. let's take a quick look at the Cowboys' schedule. And while it is top heavy, overall it kind of evens out in the back end, and it ends up being about a league average schedule in terms of strength of schedule, right? And I don't think the first 6 games are just impossible, but the fact that you're going on the road for 4 of the first 6 is pretty tough in the NFL. And then we've got our bye week in week 7. I think if you look at it, weeks 3 and 4, Arizona on the road and at home against New England, those are 2 games the Cowboys have to have, right? Arizona isn't surprising anybody this year. They're pretty much in tank mode here, starting Josh Dobbs. I don't even know if we'll see Kyler Murray this year. Maybe we will, but Arizona's an easy win there. Versus New England, with their struggles offensively the past couple years, and Mac Jones at the reins, I see that as an easy win. It's those first 2 games that are going to be really big, right? Can Dallas come out of New York 2-0? If they can, this is a team that could legitimately win the NFC, because you win those first 2 games. I really like us to win in weeks 3 and 4. And then you look at San Francisco, that's going to be a really tough game. But I do think the 49ers are down this year, right? 13 wins last year, and went to the NFC title game, obviously lost when Brock Purdy got injured to the Eagles. But that defense isn't as good as people think this year. They're going to take a step back. Offensively, they're going to play a much tougher schedule. Last year, both the defense and the offense played one of the easiest schedules in the league. They faced the 5th easiest schedule of opposing defenses, so Brock Purdy didn't have to face much, and they faced the easiest schedule of opposing quarterbacks last year. So I think we're going to see some regression from San Francisco this year. Pro bettors hit their under on their win total. It opened at 11.5, and that was bet down. So I don't want to say that that's a for sure loss, but that's definitely the toughest game on the schedule in the first 6 weeks. And then at the Chargers, who, that's going to be an interesting dynamic with Kellen Moore being the new offensive coordinator in LA with Justin Herbert, on the road in a place that's not a huge disadvantage, but you're going to be playing your 4th road game in 6 weeks. Then we get a bye week, which will be much needed after those 4 out of 6 road games. And then the schedule is not too tough. I mean, you look at it, right? Take out Buffalo and Philadelphia, and really they're going to be favored in every one of these games. Okay, maybe depending on how Miami does this year, if that defense looks a little bit better, if Tua can stay healthy, maybe the Cowboys could be a short dog there. But I think 3 games all season, I could say confidently, at San Francisco, at Philadelphia, at Buffalo, those are probably the only 3 games that the Cowboys will be not favored in, barring some miraculous turnaround from some of these teams. You look at it, Los Angeles, win total 6.5, no offensive line, right? I think New York is going to take a step back this year, although I do think they are due to beat us once, as we've just dominated them. Washington, that's a team I've got their win total under 6.5, very sharp position. I think Washington, both those games should be pretty easy wins. I'm not super high on Sam Howell. Seattle, at home. Don't have to go to Seattle. You're playing a quarterback in Geno Smith, who I can't believe got the contract he did, right? Detroit at home shouldn't be a problem, right? So you look at the schedule, and the Cowboys have no excuses here, right? If they're unable to make a real run this year, you're going to hear some questions about Mike McCarthy's job security. You're going to hear some questions about Dak, and not just the noise we've heard the last couple of years. They're going to be serious questions about, like, are we going to have to move on after this year? I don't think that's the case. I think the Cowboys are going to have an outstanding year. I bet their win total over at 9.5. It's at 10 now. I don't know that I'm rushing to the window to take 10 just because that half a game at that high of a win total, there's a lot of value, but I think the Cowboys are going to win 12 games. They might win 13. I really, really like the Cowboys this year. And please keep in mind, this is coming from a Cowboys fan who is maybe the biggest pessimist ever in terms of Dallas Cowboys football. I never believe that they're going to be good. I never believe we're going to have a chance to win a Super Bowl. And in that way, I'm never disappointed, right? But I think this year we have a real shot. If we can't do it this year, I'll go back to my pessimistic ways, saying that the Cowboys, aren't very good and won't make a run in my lifetime. And it's just going to be misery and disgust for the rest of my life as a Dallas fan. But a lot of things looking up, easier schedule, right? Really, a lot of guys return, coaching staff returns. We get rid of Kellen Moore, we get rid of Zeke. Everything is pointing up for these franchise. So hopefully the Dallas Cowboys can deliver us a great season. It's going to be entertaining. I'm so excited for the NFL. I'll be back soon with a breakdown of game 1 of the Cowboys versus the Giants. And I will be back with some more NFL content soon. Also, we'll be releasing a podcast on our new channel soon. Really excited about that. Going to be all things sports and more. So going to be a couple of us on that podcast. Super excited for that. But thanks, guys, for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed. And how about them Cowboys?